Horwich, the Lancashire and Yorkshire engine, felt miserable. Despite his brave actions in stopping a runaway, British Railways had made the decision of withdrawing him from service. He had known for a long time that this day would come, but he had always hoped for a second chance. Now he was left on a siding, out of the way, waiting for his fate to be sealed. The engines, including the shed-master, felt betrayed by British Railways and were most indignant. "There isn't any justice in the world any more," snorted Ivett. "How could they do this to poor Horwich?" exclaimed Robin. "They're getting away with murder," fumed Terry. They all agreed that something must be done, but none knew what. Euston was expecting a very important visitor. 3 Pullman coaches had been hired in for the occasion. Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, was making a visit to Birmingham. Since the royal train was indisposed and on duty elsewhere, the railway saw the Pullman coaches as a fitting substitute. Jimmy was very gentle with the coaches as he brought them into the platform. "I've never shunted Pullman coaches before," said Jimmy. "They are beautiful." "These have been brought in especially for the princess," explained his driver. "No doubt Arthur will be given the honour of pulling the royal train." Jimmy hurried excitedly away to watch the royal train depart. As he did, the princess boarded the train. It was only a few moments when a porter came running up to Jimmy. "You must go and fetch Horwich and bring him to the royal train," he panted. "Why? What's happened?" "Terry has derailed on the point, blocking Arthur from leaving the sheds." "What about the relief engine?" asked Jimmy's driver. "They always have a spare engine ready for the royal train." "That's the thing," continued the porter. "Terry was the relief. Horwich is the only engine available." Jimmy smiled happily. "Come on," he called. "We mustn't keep the princess waiting." When Jimmy arrived, Horwich was quickly being steamed up. "He's still a bit short of steam," said the shed-master, "but he should have built up enough by the time you take him to the station." "Isn't this exciting, Jimmy?" beamed Horwich. "I'm going to be a royal engine." Jimmy quickly took Horwich to the station. Once he had built up enough steam, he pulled the royal train smoothly away. Jimmy was very proud. He looked magnificent, he said to himself. "If British Railways don't reconsider, I don't know what will." When Horwich returned a day later, he was the talk of the sheds and the media. "You're back in the newspapers again," chortled the crews. "You're becoming our very own celebrity." But the fun didn't last long. The shed-master arrived with bad news. "An inspector is coming to talk about using Horwich for the royal train," the shed-master said gravely. "I hear they are not very happy with us." "Please," scoffed Terry. "It doesn't frighten me." "You mean she," thundered a voice. Walking towards the engines was a female inspector. She glared coldly at Terry and then turned to the shed-master. "What is the meaning of this, using a withdrawn locomotive on a prestigious duty such as the royal train?" she rapped. "Begging your pardon, madam, but I simply had no choice. You understand the difficulty I was put upon. The relief engine had derailed, blocking the path of the appointed royal engine. There was nothing more I could do," said the shed-master. The inspector turned to Terry. "Ah, yes, the relief engine derailing. Accidentally, on purpose." "You can drop the attitude, sweetheart. What Terry is trying to say," interrupted the shed-master, "that this incident was purely an accident. Rotten sleepers gave way under his weight, veering him off the rails. It was completely unfortunate to happen at a very inconvenient occasion. Using a vintage tank engine does not convey the modern, up-to-date image we are trying to achieve for our railway. On the contrary, had this been such a major priority of British Railways, they would have employed our mainline diesels to the task at hand, instead of assigning them to duties elsewhere." The inspector snorted crossly. "You should have made more of an effort. He can't magically make engines appear," burst out Jimmy. "Hear, hear," agreed Babs. "He couldn't have kept the princess waiting any longer," agreed Ivert. "If it weren't for Horwich, she probably would have taken the bus," huffed Terry, "and that would have been more damaging for the railway's reputation." "You still haven't even thanked Horwich for saving the day," murmured Jimmy. "But instead, you see fit to wipe him from existence without a care in the world." The inspector paused for a moment. She looked at Horwich, and then she turned. "Shedmaster, this shed is for engines who must still, in service, remove this antique to the sidings and await further instructions of disposal." The engines erupted into a deafening barrage of angry whistles. They hissed and snorted steam furiously at the inspector. She glanced at the engines and flounced away. "Who does that stuck-up cow think she is?" roared Terry. "I suppose she's only doing her job," muttered Horwich sadly. "She could at least show some compassion," said Babs. "That's not how you speak to engines at all," exclaimed Ivert, offended. "I wish Fred was here," sighed Robin. "He'd know what to do at a time like this." "Fred would make sure we weren't treated like scrap iron," fumed Jimmy. "He'd make sure we would stand up for ourselves and have our voices heard." "Then that's what we'll do." The engines consulted together. The shedmaster walked away and pretended he hadn't heard them. The next morning, there were no trains. The station was completely empty. Passengers arrived expecting their trains, but nothing came nor went. The inspector was sent to the sheds, and what she found surprised her. The engines had barricaded Horwich in the shed. A brake van was placed in front of him and was locked so no one could try taking him away. All the engines stood firm and would hiss steam viciously should anyone come too close. The crews had tried everything, but nothing would make them move. It was a standoff. "Shedmaster, explain this behaviour," shouted the inspector. "Isn't it obvious?" he said calmly. "My engines are on strike until you reconsider your decision on Horwich." "Your engines? They belong to British Railways." "And yet, madam, they answer to me." "Insubordination will not be tolerated. I order you to move immediately." "Listen, sweetheart, if you ever move for our drivers, we ain't going to move for you," sneered Terry. "Give Horwich a second chance," demanded Jimmy. "There is plenty of work for him here." "What good will that do?" snapped the inspector. "You all know steam is on the way out. Why prolong his already expired life?" "But I'm not expired," protested Horwich. "I'm still here. I have proven I'm still capable of working, just like the others." "And then what? When it's finally time to accept being replaced, then what?" "Then we'll bow out together," called Jimmy firmly. The sheds suddenly fell into silence. The shedmaster turned to the inspector. "They aren't stupid. They know the end is coming, but right this moment it isn't now." The inspector turned and walked away. News travelled fast. The newspapers had a field day. It was easy pickings for them, slating a railway that was already on its knees. Passengers had to find other means of transport in and out of the capital, which was very damaging to British Railways' reputation. They were very embarrassed. Even more so when they discovered that the reason behind the engine strike had been leaked to the press. With Horwich having stopped the runaway and been involved in rescuing the royal train, Horwich had huge support from everyone. British Railways finally buckled under pressure and gave in to the engine's demands. Horwich had been saved. Very quickly, the trains were running again, and the engines went back into service. They all felt immensely proud of themselves. They took on the railway and won. The shedmaster didn't reprimand them, but he did show his displeasure at the engines going on strike. Nevertheless, he was overjoyed that they had saved Horwich. Horwich was overcome by it all. "I can't thank you enough," he smiled. "You've saved me life. I'm in debt to you all." The engines knew it was a moral victory. Steam only has a few years left, and British Railways would have the last laugh. But they felt they did the honourable thing and saved an engine in his hour of need. Their actions were noticed by a mysterious-looking gentleman in a top hat. Out of sight, he surveyed the yards and looked at Horwich. He turned and walked thoughtfully away. Horwich is recognised wherever he goes. Some call him the runaway engine, or even more impressively, the Royal Engine. Others call him a celebrity, but to the engines that rescued him he will always be known as Horch, the Lancashire and Yorkshire engine.